Welcome to Women at Halftime podcast, but not just for women, for you men too. If you're at mid-career or the halftime of life, our inspirational topics are not only fun, but also meant to help you maximize and write your next chapter. Right here with me, Deborah Johnson. Well, hello, everyone. I'm so excited today to have a wonderful guest, Peter Wright, and we are talking about building a new chapter in life. And he has quite the story that we're going to get in, and you will not want to miss this. It's really a wonderful talk about perseverance and overcoming adversity. I guess that's the right word I want to say. And for those just maybe clicking in to us, maybe even for the first time, we are all about helping you move ahead, especially at mid-career or halftime of life. But it's very applicable to any time of life, really. And the most recent book, Stop Circling, is a wonderful one for helping you getting out of your endless roundabouts. Of course, we have others as well. The Allegory, The Summit, and Women at Halftime, and some other books too. But make sure you just connect with us online so that we can to get on our newsletter and all of that. So, Peter, well, let me not put this off any longer because I'm so excited to hear more like all of your story and some of your words of wisdom for us, because many are circling in their roundabouts. So Peter Wright, can you tell us a little bit, the audience, a little bit about your background?
Sure, Deborah. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on the show. I'm really looking forward to this. And I've been listening to some of your other podcasts. I hope I live up to the same standard of your guests that you've had on recently. So in a nutshell, let me give you the short version. Otherwise, we'd be here all day. I was born in England, London, England, true Cockney. Left when I was about 5. My dad worked for the British government and got posted to a country called Rhodesia, which is now called Zimbabwe. I had an idyllic childhood there. It was really beautiful. Climate is wonderful. I got a horse when I was 7, I think. And it was a really good life. And lived there, got married, had 2 kids. Then we went through a terrorist war. The country was about to become Zimbabwe. We'd seen what happened to every other country in Africa when it became independent. It was no place for young kids. So I moved to South Africa, mainly to make sure I had a safe environment and education for my children. Lived there. Went through a whole lot of political change there, went back to Zimbabwe as Rhodesia had become, was there for another 10 or 12 years, and then the wheels fell off in a really bad way there. And my eldest son had moved to Canada in 98. He said, come and look at Canada. So I did, and that's where I am right now. So that's the nutshell version. I'm sure you're going to ask me more, and I can go into more detail on some of those parts. But that's basically it.
Yep, that's you really have had quite a bit of things happen in between those times. So we will delve into that a little bit. But you have in your life, Peter, this is all about building a new chapter in life and kind of persevering through a lot of things that just happen. And you've gained and you've lost everything pretty much. I mean, you've ended up doing fine. And then all of a sudden you've had to leave with nothing just to survive. So what's the difference between those, in your opinion, that overcome adversary and those who don't? And is it like a nature or a nurture? And what are your personal feelings about this?
I think it's a bit of both, Deborah. Let me preface what I'm going to say with this little statement that many of the bad things that happen to us in life and the good things are either worse. Let's talk about the bad things, are worse in the expectation than they are in the reality. Now, obviously, if one's spouse or child or parent is killed suddenly, that's bad. But many of the other things that we fret about and lose sleep over are terrible when we're contemplating them. But when they happen, they're actually not quite so bad as we thought. We're still alive. We can still move around. So that's the first point. Is it nature or nurture? I do believe it's both. I think if one is fortunate enough to be born with parents who encourage curiosity, asking questions, taking risks, one is much better placed to overcome adversity through life. I also think the ability to overcome adversity is gained incrementally. So very often people who had a tough childhood can survive fairly traumatic stuff later in life better than someone who had an easy life all the way through. So I think as one overcomes one problem, realizes it's not the end of the world. One is a better place for the next one. That's certainly my experience. I'm not a psychologist. That's just an opinion from my experience and looking at other people who survived. And I think it eventually comes down to choice. Do you choose to be a victim of your circumstances, or do you choose to say, well, that was not so bad, not so good, but I'm still here, so let's learn from it and move on. I think so. That's my little thoughts on that one.
Those are great thoughts, because it really comes down to mindset. And
absolutely,
many times a bad situation, or when you overcome adversity, I keep wanting to say adversary, but adversity, you learn from that and grow from that. It's a stepping stone. And so but that's a mindset to take on that sort of mindset and not sink back into that victim mentality. And so you've really done that in your life. And you touched on the importance of your parents and how, that sort of nurturing in your life. And as we are recording this now, when we put it out, it'll be way past the holidays of Mother's Day and Father's Day. But the importance of parents, I think, for us as adults to take on the responsibility of parenting, first of all, and how fortunate we feel when we did have parents that provided enough, especially emotionally. It's not all about the money. So, how did your parents help you in that sort of perseverance? Because that's like a nurturing part of your life.
Sure. I think they did a really good job. I'd also say that life in Rhodesia when I was a child and early teenager was probably a lot more simple and in many ways safer than it might have been in North America. We didn't have many busy roads. For my early part of my childhood, we lived on a property with a 2-acre garden. I had horses there. And then we started farming, so we were on a farm. There was very little risk of children being attacked or molested. So as a 10-year-old, I would ride for hours on my horse on my own, no problem. But my father said to me, I'm getting you a horse, but you've got to look after it. And he worked in an office. He'd come home and say, did you ride your horse today? And I'd say, yeah, okay, good. If I said no, he said, why not? Well, I had homework and I had to collect eggs for the chickens. My mother raised 2,000 hens.
Oh, wow.
And well, then mum wanted me to do that. That's not good enough. If you don't ride your horse, I'm going to sell it. So you make sure you ride your horse tomorrow. Have you cleaned your saddle and your bridle? Yes, right. Okay. And that was, and we had to work. We had to, collect eggs. And then when we moved to the farm, I was milking cows to start off with. And then my mother worked really, really hard all her life. And my dad said, you can do anything and be anything you want to be if you're prepared to put in the effort. And he kept on at that. He'd been raised in England. He was born before the beginning of the First World War from a very poor family. So he hadn't had a good start in life. And he went to a really harsh boarding school his mother died when he was 5. He got home for 2 weeks at Christmas. And he pulled himself up. He studied, he did exams, and he got quite a good job with the British government and then became a farmer. So he said, it's all possible. It doesn't matter how you start, you can do it. And that stuck with me. My mother's hard work ethic, and I'll tell you a little later about her and my father's bravery, physical bravery, that all helped. I think instilling the work ethic right at the start. Not only that, taking responsibility. If we were, as kids, my brother and I, caught telling lies, we were in serious trouble, right? If we owned up to a misdemeanor, then we might still get punished, but not as severely. But get caught lying, you were for the high jump. So that's my background anyway.
Well, I think it's great. Your parents set some boundaries.
Yes.
You had a lot of freedom. It sounds like you had a lot of freedom.
Oh, yeah.
You could ride your horse for hours at a time. I mean, that's a lot of freedom to have and just to be outside. But you better collect those eggs, milk the cow, and ride your horse every day and do, your regular chores and your homework and everything else. And we have a society today that many are not raised with this sort of responsibility. And I think a farm really kind of teaches you this, because
sure,
if you don't work the farm, you do not eat, and you do not,
that's right.
It's just the way it is. But the same thing happens to a business. If you don't work the business, and if you don't do, what you need to do behind that, it's It doesn't make your profit, or it doesn't move ahead. So I think there's a lot of principles there that are great life principles that your parents put in you. Wonderful. So now for you, this next question, I want to get into a little bit more of your background, but because we're talking about setbacks and creating a new chapter, this will introduce some of your next part of your next story. But how do you keep on going after major setbacks? What is your mindset when you have a setback?
First thing is it's sort of from the Bible, and also one of my mother's favorite sayings was, "This too shall pass." So recognizing that as bad as things seem today, they will probably look a little bit better in a few days' time. And I found that to be true for most of my life. So I think if one can recognize that as bad as things are, they're probably going to get better. It's not, if you're still alive, it's not the end of the world, right? If you're breathing, there's got to be hope. And if there's hope, there's a future. So that's one I've lived with a lot. And my little saying on my email tagline is, it's not what happens to you in life, it's what you do about it that counts. And I really believe, back to choice. If, people have suffered far, far worse than I have, got over it and done well. People who've had very few problems have crumbled. It's all choice. So that's basically it. Just and living one day at a time. And I've learned, as you'll hear in a moment, that no matter how bad things seem, you've just got to keep going. For instance, after my last big setback, when things went bad in Zimbabwe, my wife and I lost everything, and we came to Canada literally at the age of 54 with 2 suitcases, a horse saddle, and enough cash for a very old used F-150 pickup, and 6 cats. That's the important part, because Sue said, if the cats don't go, I don't go. So I had to take the whole package. But and we had no job, we had no home, we had nothing. And I came first, and I stayed with my son in a little semi-detached house in a city of 80,000. And I've never lived in a city as an adult, with 2 grandchildren I'd never met. And I was going out of my mind. I had no money to do anything, and I wasn't allowed to work because I hadn't got permanent residence. So, but I did, and I started working as a farm worker eventually, and having employed 180 people on my own farm. But that's how we did it, and we built up, and we earned some money, and we found a house to rent, and we got some furniture, and here we are today. 20 years later, we're still going strong. So, and yet at the time when it was all happening, and we were losing everything, our farm, our home, and they put me in jail for 3 days. It was tough. We thought, how are we going to survive? How are we going to survive without our stuff? The stuff was the least of our problems, and it was anyway. So I haven't given you. I can't explain much better than that. It comes back to what you said. It's mindset, and I believe choices, and just doing the best you can.
Yeah, and we're going to delve a little bit more into some of the story parts that you just mentioned. But yeah, the mindset, and you had said something to begin with, is sometimes our imagination can make something much worse than what it actually is. Then when you actually go through it, and you go, "Oh,
absolutely,
I got through it."
I'll give you a very clear example of that. When we were going through all the trouble in Zimbabwe, and they were taking our farms. My neighbor had been forced off his farm a couple of weeks before. And he came over to me one day. We were the 2nd or 3rd last farm still operating in a district of 43. And he said, look, one of my workers has come. He was living with his parents. He said, one of my workers came and said that the illegal occupiers of my farm who forced me out of my house have gone to a political meeting in the nearest village. So there's none of them on the farm. And my worker says it's safe for me to go and pick up a few of my personal things, but I don't want to go on my own. Will you come with me? So I said, yeah. And in the car going there, his name was Chris, in my truck, I said, Chris, how can you be so calm? You've just been forced out of your house. You've lost your income, everything, and you're calm. He said, well, I have to be. And he said, you will be too. I said, no, I'm going to go mad, and I'm probably going to shoot somebody when they try and force me off my farm. And he says, no, you won't. He says, you'll handle it. And he says, whatever's happened to me and all our neighbors is going to happen to you. I said, yeah, I accept that. He said, believe me, you'll handle it. And all I could worry about was how am I going to handle this? And when it happened, and it happened to me a lot worse than to him, we did handle it. And that's what I mean about the reality. For weeks, was frightening. Sorry, the expectation and the fear for weeks was frightening. The reality was pretty bad, but it was not it was life-threatening, but it was not fatal. Let's put it that way. And we survived it. So that's the example I would give, that I couldn't believe that I could handle it, but I did.
Wow. And it was kind of like that little forewarning that this is ahead. And sometimes when you get that forewarning, you're going, oh, and it's like, well, okay, I'm going to give you this shot. And you're going, you mean with that needle? You mean with, ooh, it's like all of a sudden, oh no, now, that sort of expectation. Well, okay, we'll just take a deep breath and just don't look, and then it's over. It's just
That's
over.
Right.
So there's a certain amount of that. That's very wise sort of counsel with that. So that preparation, a lot of that is that sort of mindset that you were going, because your life, well, let's talk about that. Your life in Rhodesia, how did that prepare you then just for difficult times ahead? Because that's where you were before it all turned to, yeah. Right.
So it prepared us in a couple of ways. The fact that it was also generational. We didn't have the electronic distractions that people have nowadays. So we made our own amusement. We didn't get a television till I was probably 10 or 11. Had one channel, black and white, and then my parents moved to a farm where there was no electricity even, and there was no TV coverage. So for my teenage years and early adulthood, I didn't watch TV. Rhodesia was under sanctions because we refused to hand over to what became terrorist groups. Rhodesia had the second largest white population after South Africa on the whole continent of Africa, with a significant 360,000, I think, white people at our peak. So we had the second most developed economy, the second highest generating capacity for power, most doctors after South Africa. So we were quite different to the other countries that had a handful of white people colonies. We were an independent, self-ruling territory. We weren't a colony. So we refused to hand over because we could see what would happen and what had happened down Africa. And when the British put pressure on us, our Prime Minister, Ian Smith, declared independence, UDI, and we went through 15 years of sanctions, terrorist war. I spent 10 years in and out the army. So, for instance, we had one brand of washing powder, detergent, probably two brands of soap, one brand of toilet paper, cigarettes. We all smoked because we were a big tobacco producer. We had the major brands of cigarettes would not allow us to use their brands, so we had cigarettes in plain cardboard packaging with no cellophane. We were rationed for our gas for years. We had to get coupons. We had to justify why we needed gas and get coupons and hand them in for gas or diesel. It was tough to get virtually anything. So we lived many years in that sort of state where you could get all the basics, but you couldn't get luxuries. I think when my son was 2, his Christmas present, the only thing I could find him was a little wooden train made out of blocks of wood and painted, right? And no mechanics at all. That was it. There was nothing else. So, but growing up like that, you tend to treasure what's important in life and not the shiny objects, right? And of course, when it's us against the world, which we were, and in a parallel in many ways with Israel, where virtually the whole world was against us, you have to develop a thick skin, or you leave, right? And then I was spending half my life in the army in the last couple of years, being called up for the army, half my life at home. That also toughens you up somewhat. So it was a very good background to overcoming difficult times. And then when I decided to go to South Africa, there was exchange control. We couldn't take much money with us. We took almost about a month's salary. Car had to be 5 years old. Furniture had to be a certain age, and start again with 2 young kids. And my wife couldn't get a job. That was really tough. And then I went into business and did very well for a few years. Well, I was in the corporate world, had my own business. And then I was trading with certain countries in Africa, and my two major markets, civil war broke out. And I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cargo, and I went bankrupt. And I'd personally guaranteed my company overdraft. So I walked out of there. I managed to salvage one car, which I gave to my ex-wife. Our marriage was breaking up at the same time. And I went back to Zimbabwe on a bus with a suitcase and worked for my brother for a while, then started another business. And then I met my current wife and we took over the farm and we did well for 10 years and then the wheels fell off. And when I left Rhodesia, I couldn't sell my house. So I'm one of the few people in this world who's walked away from 3 properties because of politics, right?
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's, again, you've gained, you've lost, you've gained, you've lost.
Yeah.
And that's an emotional, like a roller coaster that you've been on. And we've talked a little bit about fear, and looking at, what can be almost more fearful looking forward to it than afterwards. After you get through it, you're just going, okay, I got it. I survived. I did all right. So, but what, how do you approach fear now? And had that made any sort of lasting influence on you to really be able to influence, how you respond to life at this point?
This is going to sound strange and probably make some of your listeners think I must be a little weird. Most of the really fearful occasions I've overcome by getting angry. And I find, I don't know if it's just me, I don't think so, but controlled anger, not going into a blind rage, but controlled anger to me gave me a fire to resist fear and move through it, if you know. Let's go back a step. There's a picture behind me of me running an ultra marathon. That's a 50 miler, and I did several of those in South Africa. And that particular one used to be the biggest ultra in the world before the New York and Boston and London got so big. And it was over a very hilly course. And one year it would run from sea level to 2,200 feet, and the other year it would start at the top and run down. It was tough. But it was the sort of gold standard that every serious runner in South Africa had to do, at least one, and I did 4. Marathons themselves are tough, and then when you go double the distance for an ultra, it's not easy. But forcing yourself to do that, you learn huge amount about yourself, right? Huge amount, and other people. So that was, I would say, that really helped me when things got bad in the later years, was having that experience of running. I ran for about 5 or 6 years, and I ran many standard marathons and quite a few ultras. So that was a huge one. I also played a fairly dangerous sport on horseback called polo cross, which is like lacrosse on horseback. And I did show jumping, I did cross country. I had many falls and hurt myself a lot, but nothing too serious. That again prepares you to take the knocks, right? I got run over by cows. I fell off motorbikes and had a couple of car accidents, not when I was driving. All not too serious, but each one builds up a little bit more resistance, I think, in you. So when things got really bad in Zimbabwe and they put me in the police cells, it was a little, I thought I was going to get seriously tortured and beaten up. And it came very close because I was pushing my luck, and it didn't quite get there, but I was interrogated for 5 hours by 5 security policemen, and it was not a pretty thing.
Now, why were you put in a cell? Can you go into that?
Because I wouldn't leave the farm. What happened, I don't want to go into a long history lesson, but after Rhodesia became Zimbabwe, President Robert Mugabe was installed. He was the leader of the major terrorist faction. And he'd signed an agreement called the Lancaster House Agreement with Britain, although we weren't a colony, that he would abide by the that constitution, and not take the farms away from the white farmers. We had 5,500 white commercial farmers employing 500,000 black farm workers, and we produced a huge amount of foreign currency for the country because we exported corn, and tobacco was the big one, and horticulture. So he'd guaranteed he wouldn't do that. What he did, like many African politicians, to stay in power, he did some very bad things. He wiped out a huge number of people from another tribe who were in opposition to him. And he realized he had to stay in power for life, otherwise he would have been either executed or put in prison. So he tried to amend the constitution and he couldn't. So then he called a referendum, and he wanted to get permission through a referendum to stay in power for life and amend the constitution and take our farms away. And he lost the referendum because for the first time in 15 years, there was a credible black opposition party. So long story short, he then blamed the white farmers for him losing the referendum. So he started trucking landless people from the tribal areas with no money, no farming skills, no tools, nothing onto white-owned farms. So the only way these people could survive was to steal, right? And it spread throughout the country over 3 years. So we resisted. We had death threats. We were barricaded into our security fence around our house for days on end, 24 hours a day, with people shouting, a mob of 60 shouting, "We're coming to kill you." And we held out. Second last farm still occupied in that district. And the police came twice to arrest me, and they didn't catch me. And then I went into the village the one day, and I stupidly went to the police station, because this sounds totally incongruous, but the police would act on criminal matters, but not on political. So you could have a policeman in the morning helping you solve a theft, and the same guy in the afternoon would come and arrest you because the president wanted you off your farm. I mean, so we'd had lots of equipment stolen. We'd lost our crops because they stopped our workers from working. And they came and stole our last water pump one night. So we couldn't pump water for our cattle, our horses, our workers, ourselves. So my security guard knew where to go on to a neighboring farm. And I went to the police station to ask for a policeman to come with me to go and get it back. And while I was there, the security police came and handcuffed me and carted me away for interrogation and threw me in jail. That was a Friday afternoon. And then on Monday morning, they dragged me into a court, kangaroo court, and wanted to send me to a prison in the bush for 6 months. And my lawyer was really good, and he eventually negotiated, and they let me out on bail, provided that I never went back to the farm. So I've never seen my home again. And Sue had 2 days to get all our personal stuff out of the house. I'd managed to get a bit of equipment off beforehand. Inflation was running in the thousands of percent. So we sold everything quickly, paid off our farm bank overdraft and a couple of accounts we had. And wow, in no time, there was nothing left, and we had no income, no way of earning money. That's why we came to Canada. So the way I survived, the police, and I was the only white guy in a cell of 12 foot by 12 foot. With one night, there were 27 of us in there. So to be the only white guy in a cell full of black men in most of Africa would be a death sentence. But that was the least of my problems. It was an unbelievably humbling experience, because as they put a new guy in, now the police were not getting paid. So what they were doing is arresting people on a pretext and then telling the family of that person, if you pay a fine, we'll let him out, or him out. And then the money was never going into the government coffers, it was going to the policeman's pockets, right? So the population in the cell was changing all the time. And every new guy would come and say, sir, you're a white guy, you're smart. Please help me. How can you help me? You had to be careful, because we knew that the police put plants in there to try and get us to incriminate ourselves, right? So you had to be a bit careful. And I said to them, I'm in more trouble than you guys. I'm a political prisoner. You just stolen a fish or something. But anyway, they were really good. And we couldn't lie down because there were so many of us packed into that cell. And there was an open pit latrine in one corner going to a sewer. So the smell was horrendous. And everyone smoked in those days. So I'd taken a whole lot of cigarettes, and they took my belt away, my shoes, my shirt, and left me with a sort of light jacket. And I'd put cigarettes and matches in there. So I'd light a cigarette, I'd have a couple of puffs, and I'd pass it to one of these guys, and it would go all around the cell. You see this little red light at night. And then, but they were so good to me. There was no problem whatsoever. And here was guys worried about my comfort. Here's guys that would never live in a house with running water or electricity, right? Never own a car. Be lucky if they had a bicycle and a transistor radio. And they're asking if they can do something to make me more comfortable. You know how humbling that is? And
Wow.
even though I'd lost everything, I was richer in their eyes than they could ever imagine in their wildest imagination, right?
Wow.
And the epitome of that story was, my wife was allowed to bring me food because they didn't feed us much at all. So twice a day she brought food. But because an opposition party member had died in a big prison in the capital a few days before, and we know he was killed by the security police, but they put the word out he was poisoned by one of his followers. So Sue had to taste the food before she gave it to me. She couldn't give me the whole dish. She fed me spoon at a time through a diamond mesh fence around the courtyard where we went out for meals, right? And so she'd put a spoon of rice or a spoon of stew or whatever. And these poor black guys were getting, the staple diet is a corn porridge there, very stiff porridge and little fish like sardines. and they were getting these cold fish floating in water and stale cold porridge. I couldn't eat it. So anyway, after the first meal, I said to Sue, just bring as much food as you can. And when I'd had enough, I said to all these black guys, look, just go see my wife. She'll give you food. So they were all lining up for their spoonful of stew.
Oh, wow.
And my son and my stepson brought cigarettes. And I said to all the black guys, go and see my boys. They'll give you cigarettes. So they all went and got a cigarette. And on the second or third night, 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm sitting with my knees up around my ears because I can't lie down. And a black guy comes crawling over all the bodies and he says, sir, here's a cigarette. I said, I told you to go and get one for yourself. And he said, no, I did, but I got two because I thought you might want one. I brought one for you. Man, I just about broke down crying. I couldn't believe it. Wow.
What a story. I mean,
But I went off track. I got through it by scoring points. So I kept pushing until I almost got beaten up with the police. I'd say, I have to be allowed to clean my teeth. No, you're not. I'm a prisoner. I've got to be allowed, but there's no bathroom. I said, well, there's a tap out in the garden. No, but you can't go. I said, I've got to clean my teeth. So I've kept on and on until they let me go out in the morning and with my finger clean my teeth, right? I mean, and then I'd do something else and I kept push. And when they let us out for meals, I said, no, the guys haven't eaten. We need another 15 minutes. And what I did, I kept a tally of points. So every time I got a concession, I said, that's one to me, and they've lost one. And I got angry about it. That is what got me through those 3 days.
Wow. And you had a system. You already put together your system. With the points. And it was like a justifiable anger against what unfairness you were able to turn that to help others right around you. That's a great others centered. You just weren't for you. And what a great story too about being fed. Oh my goodness. What I mean, for those that are in there, all of us now, I mean, with as much food, everything else that we have, stories like that are just so inspiring. So, well, we were just talking about creating kind of a new system, and our habits and rituals important for a successful life. I wanted to kind of ask you that, and how. I mean, you applied this even while you were in prison in a police cell. So, how are you applying those sort of habits and systems now?
Okay, so I have several. I have a routine that every evening, before I go to bed, and normally before supper, I write down my plan for tomorrow. So I don't have a fancy book. I have a little exercise book and it says daily plan. And I write down and I make sure there's never more than 20 things on that list of what I'm going to do tomorrow. And I prioritize them and I record the time. I have a little timer and I record every day the time I spend on each task to try and get myself more effective. I also have a time allocation chart. So when I make my daily plan, I slot it onto the chart. So, for instance, 3:30 today was allocated to talk to Deborah. So, and I find the chart is more motivating than the to-do list, because if I look at that and say, you're supposed to be writing a blog post right now, drop everything and do it. Otherwise, you know what it's like, you get sucked into email. So that's one. Every weekday morning, I get up at 5 minutes before 6, and I'm on the road at 6:15, even when it's dark, and I walk for 40 minutes. It's about 2.5, nearly 3 miles. I walk for 40 minutes every morning. I did miss a few last winter when it was really cold. I also got the flu, so I stopped for a bit. But I've been going. I haven't missed a weekday for 2 or 3 months now. I don't walk at weekends because we heat with wood, so I cut wood with chainsaws, drive my tractor, split wood, stack wood, we have 2 acres of garden that I cut grass in. So I keep really active the weekend. But the morning habit, I'd say my prayers while I'm walking, ask for guidance, and I think about my business, my life while I'm walking. No computer, no phone, no distractions, just out in nature. So those are 2 habits that I really, really stick by. And I find that keeps me on track.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
And we make things so hard. It's like, okay, you got to have this certain planner, you got to have a certain, everything else. And you've got a binder of like a pad, that many of us have used going through school. that you write things down. You've got a simple timer. And I'm a big proponent of timers. I think they really are helpful.
I have one more step. I have my weekly plan is on a little, what's that,
Index
4x8 card, little index card. And that's my marker in my daily book. And then, for instance, walk. I've ticked off walk. My goal is 5 walks this week. So it's Thursday, 4 have ticked off. How often I play my guitar, I aim for 4 this week. I've ticked 2 off, right? So ritual, habit, whatever you want to call it, I tell you, it really, really keeps you on track. And goals to a degree. I walked 250 kilometers on the Camino de Santiago in 2019, the pilgrimage from Portugal to Spain. I wanted to go the next year, but of course, with the lockdown, we couldn't. I said, what other goal can I do? I said, I'm going to walk 100 consecutive days. So I did. I walked every morning for 100 days. And then I said, I'm going to do 200. I did. 300. I did. I said, I'm going to walk for a year. So that was right through the Canadian winter. I think the coldest morning was minus 19 centigrade. What's that? I don't know. It's below 0 Fahrenheit, I think. And I walked. And I walked eventually for 369 days. So that was just a goal I set, and I did it. So those sort of goals, I think, are important as well.
And they're accomplishing a couple things. First of all, I think walking and being outside is great for your mindset. It's good physically, keeping physically fit. As you said, you're chopping wood. That is very physical to be able to do, and to activity that you're using. But you've done long stretches. You've done just consistent stretches of how long, and I think it's so inspirational for all of us, especially when we reach a certain time of our life, and keeping our mindset healthy, ourselves healthy. And this is part of it, is just being active. You have to keep moving.
Oh, yeah.
That's part of what you've done.
Yeah. And it goes back to parenting, that my parents made me, they bought me a horse, so you got to ride the horse, right?
Yeah.
School sports were compulsory in Rhodesia, so I played cricket and rugby, did athletics. I was never very good at any of them. Horse sports was my big thing, but we were active and collecting eggs and milking cows and herding cattle from a young age. We were active, and that stayed with us all our life. So if you could instill it in kids, there's a good chance they'll keep it going as an adult. If you let them sit on the couch and do nothing as kids and teenagers, it's very difficult to instill that habit at a later age, right?
It's really a great principle. And, limiting time of just, glued to something and not being creative. And I think that's really, really important, raising kids. You may have grandkids, you may have all of this. It's just really important to, get out and be active. And so as we kind of look at a couple more questions that I wanted you here for, one of them is that you became a podcast host, and I was on your podcast, which was a wonderful experience. But whatever led you to doing that? Because that was probably the farthest thing from your mind, technically, of being able to do from, you're living in Rhodesia and Zimbabwe and, all of that. So
there's a couple of steps that I got there. So when I came to Canada, I worked on a farm, and this was a huge dent to my pride, right? Because I'd employed 180 people in peak season on my farm in Africa, and Africa capital stuff is very expensive, but labor is cheap. And I don't want to go into the rights and wrongs of we paid people peanuts, because we didn't pay people very much, but we paid them enough to live way better than if they'd been starving in the tribal areas, and we paid them enough to educate their kids. We did a whole lot. So we won't go into that argument. However, I employed 180 people. So my farming was riding a motorbike and using a two-way radio. I did some welding, and I did some electrical work. I didn't drive a tractor. I didn't drive a farm truck, except my own pickup if I was going to town. I didn't milk cows. I did nothing off in the farm when I was an adult. I had people to do that. So I come to Canada, and I got a job on a farm with a guy that had actually been to Zimbabwe and knew a few people there. And I drove a tractor, and I drove a tractor in summer for over 10 hours a day, right? At walking speed, I drove the tractor that Mexicans harvested melons and put them on a conveyor. So you're crawling. You know, when you've had a really active life, you know how soul destroying that is.
Yes.
And I raked straw off strawberries, and I hoed, and I did this, and I worked in greenhouses and sprinklers, all the stuff that I'd been paying people to do back home. But
Now that you
I had to do it to survive. So
yeah.
you can be as resentful as you like, but if you don't do it, you're not going to eat. So you very
Right.
quickly get over that hurt pride issue. So I did that for 4 years, and then I had a heart attack. And the doctors said, well, that's it, no more farm work, right? And I'd been smart because I'd been run my own business and been self-employed with my own business for so many years. When I came to Canada, I actually did work for 2 different farms. So legally, I could be an independent contractor. So I formed a little business enterprise, which was great for tax while it was happening. But when I couldn't do it anymore, my income stopped. There was no benefits, right? No unemployment, zero. So there I am now at the age of 60 with no capital built up because we've come from Africa with nothing, with quite a lot of credit card debt because I had to buy a better vehicle and a bit of furniture, and I've got no income. So I thought, oh my, what are we going to do? So I learned how to use the internet, how to build websites, how to write blogs, got into some public speaking, did content writing for people, got paid. Once I got over the heart attack, I did do a little bit more farm work now and again. Just one guy wanted me to run his crop dryer for a few days, a few things like that. We survived. And then in 2017, I went for my annual stress test for my heart, and they said, not good. Sent me to a surgeon. You got to have a bypass. So I had double bypass at the age of 2017. I was doing quite a lot of public speaking at the time. I also wrote a book, and we were surviving. And then COVID hit. So that was the public speaking, boom, overnight, stopped. So Kathleen, my co-host, who you met, and we'd been doing a lot of some other business together on the internet, and we had an online magazine we were involved in. We used to go to a lot of networking events, which of course stopped. So she said, have you thought of doing a podcast? She said, you got the technical ability. I said, yeah. So that's how we started. And that's sort of grown. And that's my main activity now. So it's a bit of a long story, but that's how I got into getting into a podcast.
You know, it's great. I wanted you to tell that story because a lot of people are thinking about, oh, should I start a podcast, that are starting small businesses or they're in their business. And I decided not to start my podcast until I could really keep it going, because what happens with many is they start and they get, 10 or 11 episodes and then they quit.
Yep.
There's a lot of them like that. In fact, most of them like that.
80%, so I think, yeah.
Yeah. So, but you really, really kept going. But it was part of what you had learned and developed. You ended up, because there are so many that I hear their comments of, oh, I'm just not technically, I can't do the technical stuff and, stuff. But there is a certain amount of it that you can, because if you're on a phone, you can do enough that it'll take to even launch a podcast. And so there are other little episodes, things that you have to think about. Some of those you can just hire out. Some, technical, some of that was in my wheelhouse, so I was able to do a lot. But that should not be just an excuse if it's appropriate for what you're doing. Now, not everybody, it's not going to be appropriate for everyone. So what you have done, you have expanded, and it is appropriate for what you're doing. And especially as a writer, as a speaker, you can do more virtual now, which I am doing a lot more virtual events and virtual sort of recording even now than ever. And part of that was what happened with the shutdowns, even though I had been doing a lot of video work before, but it's opened it up even more. And people love live events. I love live events, and I love appearing in live events, but I pick and choose. So I think it's important for us just to open the options. I thought that's very interesting that you went ahead and learned, and you found a co-host, which that always makes it kind of fun too. So
yeah. We took the model. I mean, you do some episodes with your husband, right? So we looked at the morning commute time or breakfast radio shows, and many of them, I don't know about in your part of the world, but up here in Canada, we have all these little regional radio stations, and many of the most popular morning shows have a man and a woman as co-hosts, and they, the dynamic works so much better than two women or two men, right?
Yes.
And so we thought we get on well. We've known one another for must be going on 10 years now through various other activities and networking events. So we thought, let's try this, and it seems to work for us, So
yeah, it's fun.
I just want to expand on what you said, though. I came here at the age of 54. As a farmer from Africa, and at the age of 60 started fiddling around on the internet, and then very quickly learned how to build websites and internet marketing. And I don't consider myself particularly good at technology, but I didn't find it that difficult. You can feel your way. So age should not be a problem for anyone who wants to do anything, really.
Yeah, and it's a mindset. And there are so many more tools now than there used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you used to have to know a lot more about code.
Sure.
So it is, I come from a long background of this. And so, it's a lot easier now. There's a lot of tools available. And I have a resource page online that even gives people some of those. You can look at that at goalsbiggerlife.com/resources. You can get a lot of links just right there, even to explore some of those. So that's a great story that you have done so well. Well, Peter, I kind of need to we need to come and wind down here. So this has been such a wonderful conversation. What's next for you? And for those who are listening, realize that in this, there will be the link to Peter in the show notes. So you will get all the information about him a little bit more and how to connect with him. So what's next for you? Do you have any other plans, or are you just kind of taking one day at a time?
What's next for me? I'd like to rebuild. One of my goals is, I used to have a couple of sports cars. I had I had one of the first 4 Mazda Miatas to arrive in Southern Africa on a promotional import by Mazda. That's in the period when I was making a lot of money with my own business. And I had one of the Mazda Miata, and I had an Austin Healey way back in a British sports car. So I really admire the AC Cobra sports car, and I'd really like to get one with a V8 engine and rebuild one of those. I'd like to go back and walk the French pilgrimage, which is about 300 or 400 miles. Well, there's a whole lot, but probably 300 or 400 miles over a month, and walk that one before I'm 80. Keep going with my talk show. Probably launch another channel in the near future. And keep going. Wow, there's so much I still want to do, and I'm only 73, so I've got a long time ahead of me. A lot still to do.
I love that attitude. That is such a great growth mindset, and talk about that a lot, especially in my Hero Mountain Summit that I have. We talk about that a lot. I've got a big free webinar that's Climb Your Summit that goes along with that too. But it is just very, very important for us at this time of life with that growth mindset. And that's very inspiring. And that's why you could build a new chapter in your life. And
absolutely.
Over and over. Yeah.
I've done it.
Yeah.
And the other, one more really important thing, Deborah, and you've probably come to the same conclusion, that no matter how secure, safe, comfortable one is, as if you look at my story, you can see that whole life can be turned upside down literally in a heartbeat or the blink of an eye, right?
Sure can.
You can be coasting along, everything going fantastic. Like my heart attack came out of the blue.
Yeah.
So everything can fall to pieces in a heartbeat. So don't waste a single minute of your life. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I just talked with, I just had another conversation earlier today, and, with somebody that had not only a heart attack, but then a debilitating stroke. It's over, for life as it was. Travel, so many things are just, you want to make sure that you're living life. I mean, I'm all about people developing the next chapter, okay, and having dreams and all of this, but you want to make sure you're also living life. And that's why, your core values are so important. And a lot of my travel this year is for family, because I have 2 kids getting married, and, there's just a lot of extra travel I have. And so I've been careful about the type of bookings I've taken. So to be able to keep life at a balance, plus I'm developing some more online material. So there are these seasons of life, but to make sure that you are living. So Peter, this has been delightful. I'm so glad that we were able to set this up. Here you are in Canada, and And we can, because of the beauty of Zoom and our online, that we can schedule these and have wonderful conversations. So I really appreciate you being a part of today. And for all of you to make sure that you click into the podcast, you get the notes, a little bit more about Peter, that you'll be able to find out more about him. You'll want to keep up with those race cars that he wants to do. I'm sure there are those that are listening. And to make sure that you click in for our weekly episodes. Sometimes I put out bonuses as well. So you want to make sure that you do that. And also connect with me on my newsletter, because you'll get also information about the podcast through my weekly newsletter. That's been going on for over 20 years. And a newsletter, goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. Easy to sign up. It's free. You can unsubscribe anytime, but it's a great way to keep up with everything. So thanks again, Peter, for being with us. And thank you all for joining us today. And I look forward to being with you again next time. So bye-bye for now.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you for joining us. It is because of our wonderful listeners like you that we keep going strong week after week. We'd love it if you'd share and follow us to not miss a single show and even write a review. You can also find all of our articles, products, and links at womenathalftime.com.